Hello, hello, hello. Happy day wherever you are. Uh, I'm just being amused. This room has gone from being a therapist's office to the place where we keep my son's winter coat and hat. So the nanny had to come grab that really quick. And now a broadcast studio for how to sell more effectively. Interesting times that we live in. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining me today, whether you're joining us live or listening and watching to the recording. This is part 4 of our series on how to build empathy in the sales process. And I said, if you haven't had a chance to watch the sessions from earlier this week, we do have excuse me one second, let me adjust this. Boop. Boom. We do have a playlist on our YouTube channel. The link is in the description, or feel free to message me afterwards. Today I'm excited. We're going to talk about some very specific tools that you can use in your conversations to build an empathetic connection more quickly and more easily. So we started off talking about why empathy is so important earlier this week in part 1. We looked in part 2 at how to actually, in a general way, build empathy in your conversations with prospects and customers. Yesterday, we talked about how to build the empathy muscle, because empathy is an intuitive, innate skill that we all have, but it's one that can be developed. We all kind of start from maybe a different place depending on upbringing and kind of personality, but it's definitely something that we can continue to build and have grow by putting some deliberate intent upon. Today, I'm going to look at 3 very specific skills, very specific tools that you can use in your conversations when you're talking with prospects and customers to build empathy more quickly. And so the 3 things we're going to talk about today are mirroring, matching, and language. Now, the first thing I want to say about everything we're going to cover today is everything can be used for good or for evil. And definitely when you're communicating, when you're influencing, it's kind of like the force. There's the light side and the dark side. And let me be very clear. I don't think you should try to ever manipulate somebody. That's not what empathy is. We're not trying to make people feel about us a certain way or look at us a certain way. That's not what we're trying to do. What we are trying to do is really build that bridge with somebody, especially maybe somebody that we don't know as well. If you think about sales specifically, and really in the context of, and this may be a cultural thing, very American thing, like the fact that we do business regularly with people that we don't know and know nothing about, like that's not necessarily common. In fact, in a lot of cultures around the world, it's much more common for you to interact with people that you know already, that are in your network. And in fact, it's rare, or there's a process to like really connect with somebody who you don't know. You wouldn't just randomly call people on the phone and say, hey, can I sell to you? So these are the 3 things we're going to look at today. Use them wisely, use them correctly. You can definitely use these wrong, try to manipulate people, or you can just use them in ways that just are really awkward and kind of self-serving. That's not the goal here. The goal, again, is to create that more comfortable relationship connection with the person that you're engaged with. And as always, if you have any questions or if you have comments, you have ideas, you have things to add, throw those in the comment section. That's why we're doing this on LinkedIn Live versus just a pre-recorded video, to give everybody a chance to be involved and engaged as we go through this. So let's talk about these 3 things: mirroring, matching, and language use. So a lot of this stems from the NLP movement, which I think was like in the 70s and 80s. Neuro-linguistic programming. It was a little, I don't know, wonky if you go and kind of like, there's nothing wrong with NLP, but there's definitely some practitioners who took it a little too far, got a little strange. But there were some core ideas that are actually really, really valuable for us to kind of understand. And so mirroring is the first idea. And what's interesting about what we're talking about today is that it's something that we kind of naturally do when we talk to people, when we engage with people. And what we're looking at, just like we mentioned yesterday, is just how do we become deliberate? How do we become intentional about using these skills? And so mirroring is exactly that. It's the idea of being in a conversation with somebody and mirroring their tone, their body language, mirroring where they're at. And I think when people do this wrong, what they think they need to do is mirror exactly. And that becomes very obvious, very fake, super awkward. It's super weird. That's not what we're going for. But here's the reality. People like themselves. And in a very baseline level, that means we like people who have the same energy that we're at and are holding themselves the same way. And the best example I can give you of mirroring when it works well is something that my wife and I enjoy doing when we're out at a restaurant. You'll sometimes notice people who are quite obviously on a date, right? Their body language says that, maybe they're not super comfortable with the other person. They're not like us and have a crying 9-month-old. They're there together. And we play this game of figuring out if it's going well. And obviously we can't hear them. We don't know anything about it except for their body language. And so what mirroring is if they are in tune with each other, you're going to notice that in subtle ways, their bodies have mirrored one another. Maybe they're sitting forward. Maybe they're sitting backwards. Maybe, they've got a hand up. Maybe, their left side of their body's leaning on a table or something. Pay attention next time you have a conversation with somebody that you're like really into a good conversation, just not even on a date, just like a friend, family member. You'll notice that symmetry starts to happen. You can be intentional with that. And again, don't try to, this is not like, the television or movie show where somebody sees himself and they think they're looking at a mirror and they're like, oh, and everybody, the other person moves their hand. Not all like that. I actually like to think of mirroring very much about body position, forward or backwards. Okay. So even if you just think of this, are you forward in the conversation or backward in the conversation? Meaning, are you leaning back and into it? Are you being like super like forthright and upfront? Think to yourself, hey, where are they at? And am I matching that? Because what happens is even just that general mirroring of tone in the body language, super, super valuable. Because if you've probably had this experience, like if you're leaning back and they're forward, there's a mismatch. It's incongruous. And human beings can tell when things are not congruent, when things don't match. And likewise, if you're up close and they're like back, you're like, wait, why are we not matching the same? So just think of that at a very simple level. Am I mirroring their body language? So it's forward or backwards. Once you start from that, it just lets the conversation, by the way, lets the conversation flow more easily because we're not on a subconscious level going, hey, something's not right here. That's gone and we're able to actually connect and match with them. So that's the first idea of really mirroring your conversational partner. And that's very similar to matching, right? And matching is much more about, instead of moving beyond just the physical body language to the tone, to the volume, to the style of conversation. And again, this is something we very naturally do, right? If we're in business, in a business setting, we might use a different tone of conversation. We might actually use a different lexicon, which is a very fancy way of saying we use different words, right? Than if we're hanging out with our friends or with our family, right? You might talk differently or speak differently when you're with your parents than you are with your buds, right? Your friends. You have these different energy levels, so to speak. And that's what we're talking about with matching. Are you matching just the energy? If you talk really quickly and your prospect does not, all of a sudden, again, there's that mismatch, right? And so it's about being cognizant of where that person is at. And so using your tone to, kind of match it. Like, and by the way, I know, for example, that I speak very quickly. Always have, probably always will. So I had to learn, especially when I was, with a new potential client, somebody who's, I'm still getting to know, like if they're more laid back, just in their tone or in their volume, like my job is to come down to where they're at, to make them comfortable, because then I get a chance to actually engage with them, connect with them, make them feel comfortable. And then I can build from there, and then maybe get them to come along on the ride with me. Maybe we'll start speaking a little faster. We'll get a little more excited. We'll get into it. But you've had an experience, I know, of somebody coming in maybe who's too energetic. Like I've met people like this who are just always balls of energy, and they're on in fuego, and they're great. But sometimes you're like, okay, I'm not there yet. Calm it down. Or the person who's really in, they're close talking. They're super excited. I'm so glad. Oh, I'm so fired up about it. And you're just like, hey, all right, cool. I like you. Just in space. That's a mismatch. And so what matching allows us to do is be aware of everything from tone to language, which we'll get to in just a moment. But, just the conversational stylings. An example I would use is, I had a post once, should you swear with prospects and clients? And there's a wide ranging conversation. But the biggest thing that I would say is, well, it depends if they do, right? Because sometimes people, might curse. And if it's not your style of curse, of course, don't. But if it's in your wheelhouse and they swear, like matching them can actually be a really valuable way of creating that connection. Again, don't swear just to swear, but know that they're saying, hey, this is where I'm at. And you can go, okay, cool. I'm with you too. So again, match to tone, to energy. And sometimes it's just being aware, like, hey, where are they right now? And am I fighting that? Am I being awkward, or am I in alignment with it? And then finally, the third thing, which we mentioned, is language. And, kind of talking about swearing there for a moment. But what I'm specifically looking at is the way they speak about the challenges and opportunities that are in front of them. What you want to do with language, as much as possible, is use the language that they use. Sorry, I got it. Adam, very interesting. So I'm glad you brought that up. Adam brought up something about when people's arms are crossed, it might indicate that they might not be fully engaged. I actually think that's not correct. Here's what you want. So, because, I'm going to hit my mic if I cross my arms too much. The person who's kind of like this can be indicative of a lack of engagement, for sure. But you have to know with body language kind of what is their baseline. And the reason I know that this is important is my normal way of standing that's comfortable for me is like this, with my arms crossed. It doesn't mean that I'm not engaged. It's just that's how I prefer to sit. Sometimes I'm very engaged. I'm thinking. So what I would always say, though, is if you're going to try to mirror them, like have that same affect. Maybe be back a little bit. Maybe be, have your arms crossed. That's okay. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're totally closed off to you. That just means that's where they're at. So go to them. Yeah. One thing with body language is there's not one thing that always means one thing. Right? There's not one pose. There's not one stance. There's not one way of holding yourself that is always indicative of inner thoughts and feelings. The biggest thing you can do to try to really start deciphering body language is know where the person's baseline is, which is why body language, if you don't know the person, it's kind of hard to figure out. But know where their baseline is, and then see if there's a change in it. That can be really helpful. So, but thanks for bringing that up. That crossed arms is definitely a very clear signal of some sort of energy level. But so going back to language, so the big thing is just to use back to somebody the language that they're using in their mind, right? So, for example, if you're talking to somebody about a product or a service that they want to get a good return on their investment, you might say ROI if they're using that term ROI. If they say, "Hey, we want a good return," just say, "We want to help you get a good return." They might use terms like productivity or efficiency, or it really depends, of course, on what product or service you're selling, but there's language that they are going to use. That is the language that is in their mind that they use to describe to themselves the issue that you're talking about. When you use it, they can hang a hook on it mentally. They go, yep, that's cool. I don't have to translate it in my mind. Not that you're using a different language, but you're using a different word. And so there's some friction that gets involved if you're not using their language back. So one of the things I always did, either mentally or even sometimes on a piece of paper, is I would write down the words that they were using to describe what they were looking for. Like, I mean, if they're like, hey, we want to drive productivity, great. Say the word productivity should be in your response to, what you can do when you're building value. That's the things that are, we really pride ourselves on having kind of a family attitude, approach to our company. Cool. I'm going to make sure I use the word family somewhere in there, because that, again, is the words that they're already using in their mind to talk about what their needs are, what their challenges are, and what their opportunities are. And they'll tell you how to talk to them if you pay attention. So that's the third thing, is use, so this isn't body language, this isn't tone, this is literally the words that people use. Pay attention to those, pick up on those, and you'll be much better off. So those are three specific tools you can use. Don't try to do it all at once. Don't all of a sudden go into your next conversation. I'm going to, sit like this. I'm going to be forward and then backwards. And then I'm going to match my tone to them and speak really quick. Oh, I'm going to speak slowly and use the exact words back to you. That's what a lot of people have done in the past. And it's, you can tell when somebody just went to a seminar and you're like, okay, chill. But take one of these and go, hey, I want to get better at that. I want to get better at doing this. And that'll really help you out a lot to, again, build that bridge and just have a better connection, a better conversation with the person you are talking to. So thank you for joining us on part 4 of our Empathy in Sales series. We're going to be back at you tomorrow, 11:30 Central. We might have my co-host, as he usually does, pop up on the 5th session in our series. And we are going to be starting a pretty fun series next week, which I'm excited about. I have no idea exactly what we're going to call it, but it's something along the lines of Zen lessons for sales mastery. And I've always been interested in Eastern philosophy and all kinds of fun stuff like Zen and Taoism. And I think there's some really simple tools. You don't have to adopt, obviously, a Zen mindset to everything, but there's some very simple tools which actually can make your sales efforts a little easier and a lot more effective. So kind of dive into some fun stuff like that. And in the meantime, watch the playlist on YouTube for all of our previous episodes. And we've been doing this LinkedIn Live for a couple weeks now. We're going to continue into the near future, at least until we get released from our homes here during this quarantine. If there's anything else I can help you with, please feel free to shoot me a message. Check out our website, davidjpfisher.com/blog, and you'll go right to over 300 articles on sales, networking, marketing, professional development, LinkedIn, all kinds of great stuff like that. And, in the meantime, don't go out unless you have to. If you do have to go out, make sure you say thank you to the people who are making things run, the delivery drivers, the mailman, and the cashier at the grocery store, and obviously all of our frontline healthcare workers and all the people who are working on, finding a vaccine or a treatment, or just really taking care of getting us out of this pandemic. If you're one of those people, thank you, and if you know those people, thank them for me. And in the meantime, be patient, be kind, take care of one another. Thanks a lot. Have a great day. Bye.